Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the last of our book break offerings for this season. As you know, Temple Sinai has the delightful honor of participating with Jewish Book Council of North America to promote Jewish authors, publications of Jewish content, and outreach to North American Jewish institutions. JBC was founded in 1943 and is devoted exclusively to the support and celebration of Jewish literature. Temple Sinai is a participant in this program with the support from the Louis David Katzman Library Fund. Tonight, we have a very special book and author presentation for you, The Einstein Effect by Benyamin Cohen. Our moderator for tonight, Bruce Koffler, and our own Einstein doppelganger, has a specialized background in science, criminology, and psychology. Bruce has worked in these fields for over 50 years, including work in law enforcement at the Ministry of Natural Resources, as a certified instructor and examiner in firearms safety training, and instructing programs on explosives and IEDs for police, military, and border officials. Bruce currently holds 2 US patents and 2 Canadian patents related to explosives and bomb disposal. Bruce is a busy participant in Temple Sinai programming as well, and with such a colorful and professionally varied background, we look forward to Bruce's introduction and Q&A with author Benyamin Cohen and Cohen's passion, Albert Einstein.
Albert Einstein. I would like to introduce this award-winning author, Benyamin Cohen. He's a journalist also, and he has a bizarre side hustle as the manager of Einstein official social media accounts, which have 20 million followers, more than most leading celebrities. Excuse my accent, please, ladies and gentlemen. In the Einstein Effect, this book, Cohen embarks on a global quest to unearth Einstein's ongoing relevance today. Along the way, he meets scientists and celebrities, speaks to dozens with the last name Einstein, including 2 rabbis, and even tracks down the brain of Einstein. I lost my brain in 1955, it's terrible. Pathologists came and took it out, but anyway. It was stolen from me, and I never recovered it. Cohen shows us the myriad ways that the Nobel Prize winners' influence still with us, giving an in-depth and often hilarious look at the world's favorite genius, like you've never seen me before. Welcome, Benyamin Cohen.
Thank you. Thank you. I don't think I've ever, can you guys hear me okay? Yeah? Okay, great. I don't think I've ever been introduced by Albert Einstein before, so this is a first. Thank you all for coming. I wish I could be there. I have very fun. I have a very fond connection with Toronto. I dated a girl in Toronto before I got married. I dated a girl. This was in the 90s when it still cost money to call long distance. And I remember the bills to speak to this girl every month. That's how much. So, in any event, I want to thank you all for coming. I know there's a lot of news going on in both our countries, and I'm glad we can spend a little time tonight talking about my favorite physicist, my favorite Nobel Prize winner, Albert Einstein. So I'm going to talk a little bit tonight and then there'll be time for questions and answers, hopefully answers as well. I'm going to talk about two parts of Albert Einstein, Einstein's head and Einstein's heart. Einstein's head and Einstein's heart. Now, I should say before we get started here, I am the last person who should be writing a book about Albert Einstein. I am the least likely person to write a book about Albert Einstein. I am not a scientist. I failed science in high school. So, I'm sure there's people in the audience who are, maybe know more about physics than I do. I'm sure there are. So I'm the least likely person. I like to call myself a likable idiot. I knew as much about Albert Einstein as most of you probably did growing up. The theory of relativity, whatever that means, the Nobel Prize, and the wild shock of white hair that looks like he stuck his finger in an electrical socket, right? That's the kind of what we knew growing up about Albert Einstein. But I want to start off tonight by telling you a story which Bruce mentioned when he was introducing me about the man who stole Einstein's brain, because that's a fascinating story, and there's actually a Canada connection to the story, as I'll tell you. And this is the first story that got me interested in Albert Einstein. And as I said, we're going to talk about Einstein's head and Einstein's heart. We're literally going to start by talking about Einstein's head. So this story starts 80 years ago, almost exactly 80 years ago. April 18th, 1955 is the day Albert Einstein died. And he died in Princeton, and he's in Princeton Hospital, and he died overnight. And the pathologist comes in the morning to perform the autopsy on Albert Einstein. And he does the autopsy. And at the end of the autopsy, when nobody is looking, he takes a saw, cracks open Albert Einstein's skull, and reaches inside and steals Albert Einstein's brain. This is a true story. This pathologist stole Albert Einstein's brain. I like to call it the greatest heist of the 20th century, right? And very few people have ever heard this story, and it's a true story. So, I totally forgot. I have a bunch of slides to share with you. So let me get that slide started. Sorry. Let's see here. Hold on. Allow. Hold on. Sorry, guys. Hold on. Why is this not? Hold on. Sorry. Just give me 1 second here. Slideshow.
Yeah.
I know, but now I can't see. Sorry, I apologize. Can you guys give me 1 second?
Okay.
Okay. All right. Now we're cooking. So you just see the cover, right?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay. So I meant to say beforehand, I have a bunch of chickens. I live in the mountains of West Virginia, and one of our chickens is called Albert Einstein, and you can see why. All right, so this guy, here's a picture of the pathologist. His name is Dr. Thomas Harvey, and he's performing the autopsy, and he steals the brain. So the question is, why did he steal the brain, right? He's not a crazy guy. He didn't want to steal the brain because he was a weirdo. He wanted to steal the brain because he was standing face to face with Albert Einstein's brain. And he thought it would be a shame not to study Albert Einstein's brain, right? We all know Albert Einstein is associated with being, a genius and one of the smartest people to ever live, especially in the 20th century. And here he is, this Einstein's body is on the table, and he's thinking to himself, wow, I can study Einstein's brain. It would be a shame not to take the brain. So that's why he took the brain. Okay. So he takes the brain, And then he goes outside and gives a press conference on the steps of the hospital. And he does not tell anybody that he stole the brain. He keeps it a secret. So he's just answering questions, how did Dr. Einstein die, et cetera, et cetera. He does not tell anybody that he stole the brain. So he takes the brain and he puts it in a mason jar and he brings it home. And he puts the mason jar on the mantle in the living room. And that's where Einstein's brain stayed for a while, because he does not know how to study brains. All he knows how to do is do autopsies. And so he took the brain. He figured, I'll get to it eventually. I'll figure out how to study Einstein's brain. So the brain lives in this mason jar in his living room above the fireplace, on the mantle above the fireplace. Eventually, his wife says, honey, this is kind of grossing out the children. Can you get rid of Einstein's brain from the living room? And being a nice husband, he takes the brain, puts it in a beer cooler, and puts the beer cooler in his basement. Now, this is true. He put Einstein's brain in a beer cooler, and it stayed in his basement for decades, lost to history. Okay, so we're talking about the 1950s, the 1960s, the 1970s, the 1980s. Einstein's brain was in this guy's basement in Princeton, New Jersey. So, as I said, he wanted to research the brain. The problem is, like I said, he didn't know how to research brains. He's not a brain researcher. And this was the days before Google. You couldn't just Google brain researcher. So what he did was that he would travel to places for work. And anytime he would travel, he would look up in the yellow pages for brain researchers, perhaps at a local university or something of that sort. And he would write down their name and address. And when he got back to Princeton, he would cut a little piece of the brain, put it in an envelope, and mail it unsolicited to these brain researchers in a regular, U.S. postal mail, brown, manila envelope. Can you imagine these professors get to work and they get to their mailbox and there's something a little smelly and they open it up and it's a piece of Albert Einstein's brain? And so pieces of Einstein's brain have ended up all across the globe. You can see there are, the pieces were sent to Tokyo and Buenos Aires and Honolulu. If you're ever in the United States, you can actually see a piece of Albert Einstein's brain. One of the brain researchers who got a piece was a doctor in Philadelphia. And when she retired, she donated her piece of Einstein's brain to the Mutter Museum, which is in downtown Philadelphia. And there's a small exhibit there. If you go today, you can actually see a piece of Einstein's brain. One time, the doctor put a few pieces of the brain in a mayonnaise jar and sent the mayonnaise jar to a professor in Alabama, and it got lost in the mail. And ever since, he decided to start using Federal Express so he can track the brain and better keep track of this so he wouldn't lose pieces anymore. So that's the story. So he was sending pieces of the brain all over. As a matter of fact, Einstein's brain was not the only thing stolen that day. Einstein's ophthalmologist was also in the hospital, and when he found out that his famous patient was in the morgue, he ran downstairs and stole Einstein's eyeballs. And Einstein's eyeballs. I hope you guys already ate dinner. Einstein's eyeballs. The ophthalmologist has since died. He's given the eyeballs to his granddaughter, and she still has them in a safe deposit box in New Jersey. At one point in time, the singer Michael Jackson offered to buy Einstein's eyeballs for $5 million, and the granddaughter said, no, we want to keep them. So, which is all to say, and then the rest of Einstein was cremated. Einstein didn't want to be buried. Einstein wanted to be cremated. So the Einstein family did not know about this at the time of Einstein's death, that the brain and the eyeballs were stolen. So when I heard this story, I thought to myself, not one teacher growing up taught me the story of Einstein's brain being stolen. And I thought to myself, there must be so much more to this story. There must be so many more stories about Albert Einstein that I don't know about. Now, of course, there's lots of stuff about Einstein I don't know, with science and physics and quantum mechanics. Obviously, there's lots of stuff about Albert Einstein I don't know. But what I wanted to find out was just interesting, quirky, bizarre, stories about Einstein the man. That's what I was so interested in learning. So that's why I decided to go on this journey and write this book and learn interesting stories about Albert Einstein. Not necessarily about his science, but about Einstein the man. So I start as I am a journalist. I work for the Forward, which is one of the oldest Jewish newspapers in North America. It was started in 1897. It covered the sinking of the Titanic. It's covering the current war in Israel. And not surprisingly, it had several interviews with Albert Einstein, back in the early 1900s. They actually interviewed Einstein's mother once. And they asked Einstein's mother, now keep in mind this was a Yiddish newspaper at the time. They asked Einstein's mother, "Did you think your son would grow up to be such a genius?" And what did she say in typical Jewish mother fashion? She said, I thought he'd be garnished, right? Garnished, if you know Yiddish, garnished is the Yiddish word for zilch or nothing, right? So even Einstein's mother wasn't impressed with him. We have an archivist at the Forward. And I asked her, I said, could you find me this article where Einstein's mother says he's garnished? And she did. And here it is. This was the front page. It must have been a very slow news day because this is the front page of the Forward from that day. And as you can see, it says, Albert Einstein's mama, I think is the first three words. And then something, something. And then look at the last word on the second line is garnished, right? So, right. So, and like I said, you can see this was the front page of the paper. So it must have been, I guess no other news was going on that day. So what I wanted to do is, I as I said, I'm a reporter, and so I wanted to write stories about articles about Albert Einstein. And so I would look on Google every morning to see if there was something about Albert Einstein in the news. And so I thought maybe a couple times a month I'd find something about Albert Einstein. But to my surprise, I found stories every single day about Albert Einstein. So first of all, there were stories, there were science stories, of course. So for example, there's a lot of modern day scientists working with Einstein's theories. So he's very relevant in the scientific community. As a matter of fact, since the year 2000, so in the last 25 years, 5 of the Nobel Prizes in physics have been awarded to scientists working on Einstein's theories. So he's very relevant, in the physics world and in the broader scientific community. So every day I check Google and I would see, new scientific discovery somehow related to Einstein. But what I also started to see was what I found more as a non-scientist, more interesting stories about Albert Einstein. So for example, there is a very large Einstein memorabilia market. Einstein, as we all know, is this pop culture figure. It is this once in a lifetime, personality. People, he was like a celebrity, and people wanted to own something that Albert Einstein used to have. So for example, Albert Einstein famously smoked a pipe, and he had a pipe in every room in his house. And a few years ago, one of his pipes went up for auction, and it sold for over $1 million, right? Because people wanted to have something that Einstein touched. Einstein famously loved wearing this leather Levi's jacket, right? It's pretty funny because here he is, this German Jewish schlubby scientist, moves to America, moves to Princeton, and he wants to be this all-American cool James Dean guy. And he found this jacket, this leather Levi's jacket, and he used to wear it all the time. Now, Einstein, famously did not like to get dressed up. He would walk around Princeton in his pajamas. He was just a very casual guy. He had holes in his sweaters, holes in his pants. He didn't like to wear socks. He was just a very, schlubby dresser. And this leather Levi's jacket was an easy way. He could just put it on top of his pajamas and go out. So he wore this jacket a lot. So a few years ago, this leather Levi's jacket went up for auction. And the company that bought it was Levi's. Levi's wanted to take this famous Einstein jacket and put it in the Levi's has a museum, and they wanted to put it in the Levi's museum. And this is the curator of the museum. She said when she opened up the box and touched the jacket, she smelled all the tobacco smoke that was still there from Einstein's days, from back in the 1950s. So lots of things of Einstein's have gone up for auction. The most expensive Einstein auction happened a few years ago, I think 2021, they found a 54-page manuscript that Einstein was working on the theory of relativity. He was trying to come up with the theory of relativity. And it's a bunch of his notes and scribblings and things like that. It went up for auction at Sotheby's in Paris, and it sold for over $11 million. So you see, today, people are very much fascinated with Albert Einstein. In the book, The Einstein Effect, hopefully you all have a copy. If not, you can purchase a copy after tonight's event. I interviewed for the book this guy in Connecticut who has the Guinness World Record for the largest collection of celebrity hair. He has famous people's hair. So he claims to have, for example, Abe Lincoln's hair from the night Lincoln was shot. I don't know if it's true. I don't know if it's really Abe Lincoln's hair. He has some of astronaut Neil Armstrong's hair that he bought off of Neil Armstrong's barber. Neil Armstrong was very upset when he found out, and he sued this guy. But he also, I walked into his living room, and he shows me a Ziploc bag with some white hair, and he says, "This is Albert Einstein's hair." Again, I don't know if it's true, but it just goes to show you that Einstein is very much front and center, even decades after he died, that he's still so popular. So I started writing all of these interesting, quirky, bizarre articles about Albert Einstein, about the guy who stole his brain, about the guy who has his hair, Levi's jacket. I started writing all these stories about Albert Einstein. And then one day I get a call. This is back in 2017. I get a call from the Albert Einstein estate. And I got a little nervous because the Albert Einstein estate, I'm worried maybe they're calling me up to say, "Hey, Benyamin, could you stop writing all of these silly articles about Albert Einstein?" I don't know. By the way, the Albert Einstein estate, as I'll explain a little later in the talk, is located at Hebrew University in Jerusalem, and I'll explain why it's there. So they called me up and they said something to me very interesting, which I had no idea about. When social media companies first started, so when Facebook first started and Instagram and Twitter, and I guess 20 years ago at this point, when those companies first started, they reserved the pages for dead celebrities. So they have like an official Albert Einstein page on Facebook and an official Albert Einstein page on Twitter. There's an official Elvis Presley page. Okay, so they didn't want some Joe Schmo in his basement to run the official Elvis Presley page. They wanted to give the official Elvis Presley page on Facebook to Graceland, to the Elvis estate. And so Graceland can post pictures and sell tickets to Graceland and do whatever they want. But so they reserved those pages of dead celebrities and they gave them to the estates of those dead celebrities. So the Albert Einstein estate, which, as I said, is at Hebrew University, owns the official social media pages for Albert Einstein. And they called me up and they said, "Listen, we're very busy doing real academic research here at the Einstein Archives. Historians come here, scientists come here to look at Einstein's papers. We don't have time to deal with this social media pages of Albert Einstein. You, Benyamin, seem to know a lot of interesting stories about Albert Einstein. Would you like to run Albert Einstein's Facebook page and Twitter page and Instagram page?" And so I said, "Sure, that sounds like a fun job." So since 2017, I am Albert Einstein. So when you go online, when you follow Albert Einstein on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter, it's me who's pretending to be, Albert Einstein. And so Einstein, here we go. Einstein has 20 million followers on social media. So just to put that in perspective, Albert Einstein has more Facebook fans than Tom Hanks. Okay? Albert Einstein is by far the most active dead celebrity on social media. John Wayne is on Twitter, but he really doesn't have much to say. Marilyn Monroe occasionally offers some fashion advice, but again, she's not so active. As Albert Einstein, because I'm so fascinated by Albert Einstein, I post on Einstein's accounts probably 6 times, 7 times a day. That's how active Einstein's account is. And so your question is, okay, well, Benjamin, what are you posting on there? So I'm posting a lot of interesting articles. As I said, Einstein's in the news all the time. I also post some regular features. So for example, the Einstein Archives gave me hundreds of photos of Albert Einstein, many of which have never been seen before. And so every Thursday, I do a little feature. If you look today, every Thursday, I do a little feature called Throwback Thursday, where I share an old Einstein photograph. So here's one I shared recently. This is Einstein, and is standing in front of the White House. That's President Harding to one side of him, and his wife Elsa on the other side of him. They're standing in the lawn at the White House. So that's a picture I shared recently. Here's another picture I shared recently. This is a picture of Einstein on top of 30 Rockefeller Center, which is, a big in Manhattan, a big famous skyscraper in Manhattan. It's a great white suit that he's wearing. I love that suit. So that's something I share every Thursday. As we all know, Einstein is very famous for his quotations. He has a lot of inspirational quotes. Sometimes you see them on a coffee mug or a t-shirt or a poster. So every Wednesday, I do something called Wednesday Wisdom, where I share an inspirational quote from Albert Einstein. And then something interesting, I get a lot of fan art. A lot of these 20 million fans are also, they're very much fascinated with Einstein, and they will paint pictures of Einstein or draw photos of Einstein, and they will send them in to me. And every Friday I pick one and I share it with his 20 million fans, and I call it Fan Art Friday. So every Friday, you'll see tomorrow morning, I'll share one, some artwork that one of his fans sent me. Here's another one. This one looks to me like I think it was created with artificial intelligence, I think. So the interesting thing is I get emails from kids in India, from teenagers in India, asking me for help with their science homework. They message Albert Einstein. Little do they know, some short Jewish guy in West Virginia is pretending to be a Nobel Prize winner. So I'll tell you a funny little thing that's happened since. So I've been doing Albert Einstein. I have been Albert Einstein since, for 8 years now. Since I've been doing it, and since he has so many fans, other dead celebrity estates have hired me to be other dead celebrities on social media. So recently, I got 3 new dead celebrities that I manage. If you follow Robert Oppenheimer, obviously another physicist, a colleague of Einstein's, Maya Angelou, and astronaut Neil Armstrong. So if you follow any of these dead celebrities on Facebook, whatever, I'm the one that posts all the content on there. So it is. When I went to journalism school, in the 90s, if you were to say to me one day you'll have a job managing dead celebrity social media, I would have no idea what you're talking about. It's nice. The Maya Angelou, her family is very much involved, and I get to talk to her. I talk to her granddaughter a few times a month, about what we should post and things like that. Anyway, so going back to Einstein, the question is, why is Albert Einstein so famous? Why does Albert Einstein have 20 million fans, right? Shakespeare doesn't have 20 million fans. Why does Einstein have 20 million fans? We could talk for a while about why Einstein is so famous. I'll tell you for a few minutes tonight my theory about why I think Einstein is so famous. So first of all, Einstein came about at a time when all of modern media was in place. Magazines, photographs, radio, newspapers, even television was around in Einstein's time. And he really played into it. He had this grandfatherly look, this Zadie look with the hair. He was very laid back, very approachable. He would be walking down the sidewalk in Princeton, and a kid would tug on his jacket and say, "Dr. Einstein, can you help me with my my math homework?" And he would sit down on the sidewalk and help them with their math homework. It's very different. If you guys saw the movie a few years ago about Robert Oppenheimer, right? Yeah. The famous movie that came out. This is a picture I'm showing you right now of Einstein and Oppenheimer. They were colleagues at the Institute for Advanced Study. That's where this picture was taken, in Princeton. If you saw that movie, Oppenheimer was very much a very serious guy, right? Always wearing a suit and tie. He had that fedora. He was always wearing the hat. Very serious guy, didn't like to joke around. Albert Einstein was the exact opposite. He loved to joke around. He loved to do silly things, and he loved to talk to anybody. So he was very much, a very approachable person. And that kind of endeared him to many people. It mythologized him to many people. He was also a world famous person. He was a lot of people consider him to be the first modern day celebrity. I'll tell you a story. Einstein was friends with Charlie Chaplin. Here's a picture. There's a picture of Einstein with Charlie Chaplin. So Chaplin once invited Einstein to a Hollywood red carpet premiere. It was one of Chaplin's movies. And here's a picture from that. You see Einstein standing next to Chaplin. And then next to Chaplin is Einstein's wife, Elsa, who does not look so happy to be there. And at the event, all of the reporters were more interested in interviewing Albert Einstein than they were Charlie Chaplin. Even though they couldn't understand a word Einstein was saying. He has this thick German accent. He's talking way above their heads, but they were all more interested in talking with Einstein than with Chaplin because he was, he was a celebrity. Another story, Einstein and his wife Elsa traveled to Japan in the winter of 1922. They get to Japan, they check into their hotel, they walk out onto the balcony, and they look out onto the street below, and there's tens of thousands of people, throngs of people looking up at the balcony just to get a glimpse of Albert Einstein. Like he's a rock star, like he's like, Mick Jagger from the Rolling Stones or something. Whenever he wrote a new scientific paper, Macy's in Manhattan, in the front window display where they normally put, mannequins with the latest fashions or Christmas displays, in the window at Macy's, they would put a copy, they would post a copy of Einstein's latest scientific paper, like it was a royal baby announcement or something. Like that's how famous he was. And he would get chased by the paparazzi. And Einstein was smart. He knew what made for a good photograph. So there's a lot of pictures, for example, of Einstein taking his hat and tossing it in the air because photographers love taking that picture, that playful image of Einstein tossing his hat in the air. Think about it. There are no pictures of Marie Curie tossing her hat in the air, right? So, those are some of the reasons I think Einstein, became this pop culture myth, this big celebrity. One of the things I like to show Einstein's 20 million fans is how Einstein is relevant to their day-to-day life. And so Einstein actually helped invent many of the technology that we use every day. So if I say, for example, Alexander Graham Bell, you would say? The telephone, right. Now, if I say Albert Einstein, it's a little harder to think of a piece of technology that we use today with Einstein. So I'll share with you my favorite example. All of you probably know about GPS. You probably all came to the shul tonight using GPS, the global positioning system, in your car when you're driving. GPS gives you directions how to get from point A to point B. So the way GPS works, I'll give you a 30-second Einstein for Dummies lesson on how GPS works. There's 3 pieces of information that GPS needs. The first piece of information is there is a satellite in space. The satellite in space is floating around. So it's not static, it's floating around. You're in your car driving, so you're not static either, right? You're also moving. You're driving in your car. So the satellite's moving, your car is moving, and we're on planet Earth, and Earth is constantly spinning. So Earth is moving. So all 3 of these pieces of information are moving. The satellite, you in your car, and Earth. All 3 of them are moving. Einstein's theory of relativity is an elegant mathematical equation that allows all 3 of these data points to work together. And that's how GPS works. And so without Einstein's theory of relativity, we would not have GPS. Think about that the next time you have a delivery to your house. Or think about that the next time the pizza delivery comes to your house. That pizza delivery guy found your house thanks to Albert Einstein, right? What has Galileo done for you today? Nothing, right? If you Google when you get home tonight, who invented GPS? 2 names will pop up. The first name is Albert Einstein because of what we just discussed. And the second name is a woman named Gladys Mae West. Gladys Mae West, did you guys see the movie Hidden Figures a few years ago? Right? Hidden Figures was about these women, mostly African-American women in the 1960s who worked for NASA, and they were called human computers. They did a lot of the math to help NASA engineers. Gladys Mae West was one of these hidden figures. In the early 1960s, she worked for the US Navy, and the Navy had just sent a satellite into space, and they were having trouble tracking the satellite because it was floating in space. And Gladys Mae West was the first person to realize you could apply Einstein's theory of relativity to satellites in space. And so she and Einstein are credited with inventing GPS. I called up Gladys Mae West for my book and interviewed her. She's still alive. She's in her 90s. And she said something to me very funny. She said, Benyamin, I don't even use GPS. I like the old fashioned maps, those big maps that you would fold up and put in your glove compartment. So, even she doesn't use GPS. There's lots of technology that we have thanks to Einstein. Most of what Einstein accomplished, he accomplished in the year 1905. He did so much. He was so prolific in 1905, and he was just 26 years old that historians simply call it Einstein's miracle year. It was such a big year. And it was funny. He was 26 years old. He couldn't find a job. He had just graduated. He graduated physics school. His dream was to become a physics professor, and no school would hire him. He wasn't a great student. He didn't like authority figures, so nobody wanted to hire him. He got so desperate. He put a classified ad in the newspaper saying, "Hi, my name's Albert Einstein. I'll tutor your kid in math." Can you imagine your high school kid getting algebra tutored by Albert Einstein? Eventually, thanks to a family friend, he got a job at the patent office in Bern, Switzerland, and he was just sitting all day reviewing patent applications. And at night, he'd come home after a long day's work. He had a wife and a small child at the time, and he wrote a bunch of revolutionary papers which changed the way we look at the world during that 1 year. And one of the biggest things he wrote about that year was a scientific paper about the photoelectric effect. Again, I'm not going to go into all the science, but the photoelectric effect basically turns light into energy. And we see this in technology that we use all the time. When you use a remote control, that is the photoelectric effect at work right there. So when you're at home watching Grace and Frankie on Netflix and you hit pause, you have Albert Einstein to thank for that, because that's the photoelectric effect. When you walk into a grocery store and the doors automatically open when you walk up, that's the photoelectric effect. When you scan something at the supermarket checkout scanner, that red light reading the barcode, that's the photoelectric effect. So many things that we use every single day are thanks to the photoelectric effect. We often associate Albert Einstein with the theory of relativity, E equals mc squared, but he actually won the Nobel Prize for the photoelectric effect, right? A lot of people don't know that because that was such an important thing. Okay, so I said tonight we're going to talk about Einstein's head and Einstein's heart. So we've talked about Einstein's head. Literally, we talked about the man who stole Einstein's brain. And we also talked about some of the ideas that came out of that brain, right? Now I want to pivot and talk about Einstein's heart. Now, when I say Einstein's heart, I don't mean literally. To my knowledge, nobody stole Einstein's heart. When I say Einstein's heart, I mean his neshama, his soul. He was a mensch. Einstein's humanitarian work. Einstein was a great scientist, but he was an even bigger humanitarian. And so I want to talk for a few minutes tonight about that. As we all know, Einstein lived in Germany. And this is a picture of Einstein in Berlin in the early 1930s. And Einstein was the most famous Jew in all of Germany in the early 1930s. He had already won the Nobel Prize, world famous, as we discussed. As the Nazis rose to power, they hated Albert Einstein. And they put a $5,000 bounty on his head. They wanted him killed. And there were actually 2 assassination attempts against Albert Einstein in Berlin. Luckily, he survived. In 1933, he realized it was no longer safe to be in Germany. And fortunately, he was able to get a visa, and him and his wife and his stepdaughter were able to move to Princeton, New Jersey. And he came on what's called an EB, visas are in the news now, obviously a lot. He came on what's called an EB-1 visa. It's a visa specifically designed for academics, because American universities were trying to get the best and the brightest professors from all over the world, and they created this special visa to make it easier for academics to move to the United States. That's how Einstein came. When Einstein came to America, they changed the name of the visa. It is now called the Einstein visa. To this day, there is still an Einstein visa, and people are still coming to America today on what's called an Einstein visa. Now, they've lowered the standards. You don't have to be someone of high academic achievement. You just have to be anyone of high achievement. So I'll give you an example. Melania Trump actually came to America on an Einstein visa. She was a successful supermodel, and she came because she was a high achiever. She came on an Einstein visa. A lot of athletes, professional athletes, like so if a Spanish soccer player wants to play soccer in America, he will come to America on an Einstein visa because he's a high achiever. So Einstein gets to America and he tries to get to his goal once he moves to America is to try to rescue as many fellow German Jews as he can. And he tries to get them visas. It's hard because, as we know from history, as the 1930s wore on, America started to close its doors and tighten up who they would let in. But Einstein was able to get some people visas. And there were some German Jews who escaped thanks to Einstein's help, who moved to Alaska, who moved to Mexico. And there are Jewish families today in Alaska and Mexico who are there thanks to the generosity of Albert Einstein. The biggest thing that Einstein did when he got to the United States was he created a nonprofit organization called the International Rescue Committee. And he launched this organization for the sole purpose of rescuing German Jews from the Holocaust. And obviously they were not, as successful as they wanted to be, but they were successful in some ways. They were able to get some Jews out of Germany into neighboring countries. And that was probably the biggest thing that Einstein did as far as his humanitarian work. The beautiful thing about this is the International Rescue Committee, Einstein created this nearly a century ago. It's still around today. Not only is it still around today, it is one of the world's largest refugee aid organizations, Einstein's International Rescue Committee. To this day, they are helping refugees all over the world. They were in the news back in February 2022 when Russia invaded Ukraine. Remember, we were reading all of these stories, hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians when Russia invaded back then, a few years ago. They were all fleeing to neighboring countries. One of the organizations that helped was Einstein's International Rescue Committee, and they helped people cross the border into Moldova and different countries. I interviewed for my book this Jewish Ukrainian woman. Her name is Hannah, and she was rescued by Einstein's organization when Russia invaded, and Einstein's organization got her across the border to Moldova. And I interviewed her while she was in Moldova, and she told me she would not be alive today if it wasn't for Albert Einstein. And she called Einstein an instrument of God, is what she said. Now think about that. Einstein's been dead since 1955. 80 years, right? If I'm doing my math correctly. Yeah, 80 years. And he's still having an impact, literally saving lives today. So as I said, the International Rescue Committee is a very large international organization. And what does every international large organization have? They have a celebrity spokesperson. Obviously, they can't have Albert Einstein, so they got the next best thing. They got actor Mandy Patinkin. Many of you may know Mandy Patinkin. He was in Princess Bride, Chicago Hope, Homeland. He is also, I don't know if you've ever heard, he's a great singer. He actually performs Yiddish concerts all over. He's actually on tour right now. I know in America he's on tour right now giving Yiddish concerts. And he's also a humanitarian, and his cause is helping refugees. And he is not some celebrity who just comes and films a commercial and leaves. He walks the walk. And since 2015, he has been the face of Einstein's organization, the International Rescue Committee. And so I had the wonderful opportunity of interviewing Mandy for my book. It was during COVID when I interviewed him. We interviewed on Zoom. And I only was supposed to interview him for a half hour. We ended up Zooming for 2 hours. He was such a generous guy. And he told me how Einstein inspired him to become a humanitarian and help refugees. A funny little side story. After the book came out, Mandy called me up And he goes, "Oh, Benyamin, I'm so happy you devoted a chapter in your book to Einstein's work with the International Rescue Committee. I hope it shines a light on this important work we're doing. I'll do anything I can to help you promote the book." And so Mandy agreed to do an event with me in Manhattan at the Temple Emmanuel. He and I got on stage. Here's a picture of me and Mandy. He's holding up some eggs. I gave him a half a dozen eggs for my chickens. By the way, we call our chickens the Cohens. Um, so, anyway, so I felt like a kid who had won like a Make-A-Wish Foundation prize. Here I was on stage with Mandy. You know, I didn't deserve to be there, and it was kind of a pinch me moment. My family was in the audience. I should say I come from a family of rabbis. My dad's a rabbi. All my brothers are rabbis. My sister's married rabbis. It's kind of the topic. It's kind of the topic of my first book called My Jesus Year, where I spent a year going to churches. If you're interested in that, I can come back next year and talk about that. But so two of my rabbinic brothers were in the audience, and I brought them backstage after the event to meet Mandy. And I should not have let them be alone with him for 5 minutes, because when I came back, one of my rabbinic brothers was asking Mandy for a donation, and my other rabbinic brother was asking Mandy to join his shul. So I was like, guys, please stop embarrassing me. So, okay, helping German Jews was one of his biggest causes, but it was not the only humanitarian cause that Einstein was involved in. Einstein was very much involved in the civil rights movement. He moved to America. He had escaped Germany, where he saw what happened when you treat a minority as less than. He saw what that happened, what that could lead to in Germany. And he came to America, and he could not believe the racism that was going on in America. And he goes, I will do whatever I can to help with the civil rights movement. And he got very much involved. He traveled the country with the NAACP, raising money for them. Here's a picture of Einstein giving a science lecture at Lincoln University, which is in Pennsylvania. It was the first college to offer college degrees to African-American students. And Einstein went there and gave a lecture there. Einstein actually spoke at the commencement address at Lincoln University in 1946. And he said, I will not stand idly by and watch this happen. There was a black student at Princeton who could not afford tuition. Einstein paid for his tuition. My favorite story about Einstein in the civil rights movement has to do with Marian Anderson. I don't know if you know, Marian Anderson was a very famous African-American opera singer. That's a picture of her in the middle. And Einstein was a big music lover. Einstein himself played classical music. He played the piano and the violin. He actually used to he gave a charity concert raising money for the United Jewish Appeal, where he played the piano. And he loves music. So Marian Anderson once came to Princeton to perform a concert, and Einstein was so excited to go. He goes up to her backstage. This is a picture, and he's like a fan. He's schmoozing with her, and they get to talking. And she goes, let's continue talking. I got to walk to my hotel. So they walk from the theater to the hotel. As a few blocks, they get to the hotel. It's the Nassau Inn. The Nassau Inn is still there. It's the main hotel on the main street in Princeton, New Jersey. And she goes to check in, and the receptionist says, sorry, Miss Sanderson, this is a whites-only hotel. You cannot stay here. And Einstein was so upset. And he's like, I can't believe this is happening. And he invited Marian Anderson to stay at his house. And they walked. It's a half a mile. I drove it when I was in Princeton recently. It's a half a mile from the hotel to the... Einstein, for the guy who invented GPS, he was horrible with directions. He never got his driver's license. There are lots of famous stories of Einstein used to love to go sailing, and he would get lost on a lake. He would get lost, and kids would have to tug his boat back to shore. So Einstein, they walked, which is all to say they didn't have a car. They walked to his house, and she spent the night, and they became lifelong friends. And every time she came back to perform in Princeton, and at this point, the Nassau Inn had changed their policy, and they were letting African Americans in. She goes, I don't want to stay there, even though you're letting me in. She always would stay at Einstein's house. They became lifelong friends. A few years ago, somebody wrote an off-Broadway play about the friendship between Albert Einstein and Marian Anderson. And this play, it's called Oh, What a Night, about the night they met. And it's on tour. So I don't know if it's coming to Toronto, but you should keep an eye out for it. And it's about their friendship. So we talked about helping German Jews. We talked about civil rights. One more cause that Einstein was very much involved with was speaking out against war. Einstein called himself a militant pacifist. He hated war. He never served in the army when he was a young man, and he hated war. And he spoke out, vociferously against war. And shortly before he died, he teamed up with his friend Bertrand Russell. That's a picture of him right here, a British philosopher. And together they wrote what's known as the Russell-Einstein Manifesto. And in it they wrote, "We are not members of this nation or that nation. We are all human beings." Right? So he was very much concerned about war. And so in the end of the 20th century, in December 1999, Time Magazine, every year Time Magazine does a person of the year. At the end of 1999, they wanted to do a person of the century. And they had a lot of choices. JFK, MLK, Gandhi, Princess Diana, the Beatles. They could have chosen so many people. But they chose Albert Einstein. Because, yes, he was a great scientist, Nobel Prize winner, sure. But I think it was much more because of his humanitarian work. I'm going to apologize to Bruce. I know I'm supposed to stop soon for Bruce to interview me, but I still have a little more to go. I would be remiss if I didn't talk tonight just for a few minutes about Einstein's connection with Israel. Einstein was a staunch Zionist. Here's a picture of Albert Einstein on his first trip to America in 1921, standing next to Chaim Weizmann. Chaim Weizmann was a friend of his. Chaim Weizmann was a scientist, so they were friends from the scientific community. Chaim Weizmann was coming to the United States in 1921 to raise money for this new country he was thinking about starting. And he says, "Einstein, will you come? You're a famous celebrity. You just won the Nobel Prize. If you come, we can raise lots of money for Israel." And so Chaim Weizmann and Albert Einstein traveled around America raising money for Israel. Einstein went to Israel in February 1923. He was in Israel for 12 days. And while he was there, he was one of the co-founders of Hebrew University in Jerusalem. If you go to Hebrew University today and you walk in the lobby and they have a picture of all their founders, the first picture is Albert Einstein. He is one of the co-founders of Hebrew University, and he was on the first board of governors of Hebrew University. That is why when he died, many people associate Einstein with Princeton or the Institute for Advanced Study, which is in Princeton. Einstein left his entire estate, not to them, but he left it to Hebrew University. And what he left was many things. He left about 85,000 documents. A lot of that is his scientific writings. They have the original theory of relativity there at Hebrew University. You can see Einstein's writing. There's actually, I saw it when I was there last year. There's a grease stain on page 45. Maybe Einstein was eating a Hamantaschen and he dropped it. I don't know, but there's a little stain on page 45. They have Einstein's Nobel Prize there, but they have the biggest treasure trove is this 85,000 documents. So it's a lot of his scientific papers, but it's also lots of fan mail. As I said, as we talked about so much today, Einstein was this big celebrity and he got a lot of fan mail from just everyday people. Kids would write him letters. I saw a letter when I was there from a plumber in Manhattan, and the plumber said, "Dr. Einstein, if physics doesn't work out for you, we'd love for you to join our plumbing company in New York." And so he just has all these letters there. And Einstein, being a man of the people, would often write back. And he had like pen pal relationships with all these people. And you would think, okay, well, the archives has all of the incoming letters, but they probably don't have all the outgoing letters because those were sent to all these people. But no, Einstein's secretary, Helen Dukas, was very smart. She typed out all these letters on carbon copy paper. So one letter, one copy went to the recipient and one copy stayed at Einstein's office and is now at Hebrew University. So if you go there and visit there, they have this beautiful, you can see these beautiful relationships that happen. Right now, Einstein's archives at Hebrew University are just in a few small offices, literally in some filing cabinets. But I'm happy to report they got a rather large donation, and they are now they broke ground on what's going to be the world's largest Einstein museum. And it'll be on the campus of Hebrew University in Jerusalem. This is an architectural rendering of it. And it will have all of these 85,000 documents. You'll be able to see this there, and you'll be able to see all of these wonderful things there. So hopefully, I don't know, maybe another year or two until it's built. Um, a funny story about Einstein in Israel is in 1952. Here's a picture, by the way, of Einstein and David Ben-Gurion. In 1952, Chaim Weizmann dies. Chaim Weizmann was the first president of Israel. He dies in 1952. Israel needs a new president. Now, remember, president of Israel is a ceremonial position, like, King of England. And so David Ben-Gurion said, let's ask Albert Einstein to be the next president of Israel. And so David Ben-Gurion sends the Israeli ambassador to the U.S. to Einstein's house in Princeton, knocks on the door, and says, Dr. Einstein, great news. We'd love for you to be the next president of Israel. He goes, let me think about it. Come back tomorrow. The guy comes back tomorrow, knocks on the door. Dr. Einstein, what's your decision? Do you want to be the next president of Israel? As we all know from history, Einstein politely declined. He did not become the president of Israel. He says, listen, I'm not a fancy guy. I don't like to wear black ties and go to fancy galas. You don't want me being president of Israel. There's a great story. Einstein was once having some friends over for dinner, and his wife said, Albert, get dressed. We're having friends for dinner. And he goes, listen, if my friends want to come and see me, they'll see me. If they want to see my clothes, I'll show them the closet. They can see my clothes. This is a picture, by the way, just to give you an idea. This is a picture of Einstein on the beach. I don't know if you could see it there. He's wearing his wife's sandals with no socks. This is not the guy you want to be president of your country. But he goes, listen, I'll do whatever I can from America to help the Zionist cause. And he did. And he, tried to promote Israel as much as he could. Yom Ha'atzmaut, 1955, the three television networks in America, NBC, CBS, ABC, asked Einstein to deliver a message that would be simulcast across America on Israel Independence Day 1955. They wanted Einstein to deliver a speech. So Einstein starts writing the speech. Einstein gets sick. Einstein goes to the hospital. Einstein dies. Einstein died 2 weeks before Yom Ha'atzmaut 1955. So he never got to deliver the speech. But the nurse who found Einstein in the hospital room after he died found the speech on his hospital bed. It was the last thing Albert Einstein did before he died, was finish writing this speech in honor of Israel. You can go home tonight and Google, you can actually see the speech. The original piece of paper is at Hebrew University. So literally to his dying breath, he was working, to promote the state of Israel. I'm going to conclude tonight. I got about a few more minutes. I'm just going to conclude tonight. You're probably all wondering, we started tonight talking about the man who stole Einstein's brain. I just want to finish that story in case you're all wondering, well, what happened to the brain? This is a picture of the man who stole Einstein's brain in 1997. So he's in his 80s at this point. And he had cut up the brain so many times it was in multiple 3 jars. And he's starting to feel guilty that he stole the brain. And so he decides to return the brain to Einstein's granddaughter, Evelyn, in San Francisco. And he rents a Buick Skylark. He puts Einstein's brain in the trunk of the car. And he drives in what I can only imagine is the most bizarre cross-country road trip from New Jersey all the way to California. He gets to California, goes into a restaurant, meets Evelyn Einstein for lunch. They seem to be having a nice lunch. He leaves the brain in the trunk. Halfway through the lunch, Evelyn gets up to use the restroom, and this guy has a change of heart. He decides, you know what? I don't want to return the brain. He runs out of the restaurant, jumps in the car, drives all the way back to New Jersey with the brain, so he never gave it back to Evelyn Einstein. At one point, so eventually 2007, fast forward to 2007, this guy is now in his 90s. And he's about, he realizes he's not going to be around forever. He needs to figure out what to do with Einstein's brain. So he puts these 3 jars in a cardboard box and brings the cardboard box to a younger doctor who he's friends with in Princeton. I say younger, he was maybe in his 60s at the time. Maybe today he's in his mid-70s. And he leaves the box at this guy's office and says, it's your problem now. And he leaves. And he dies shortly after. So the current caretaker of Einstein's brain is this younger doctor. Again, he's in his 70s. But he doesn't want anyone to know who he is. So if you try to Google his name tonight, you'll mostly see the name Dr. X. He wants to remain anonymous. So a lot of newspapers only refer to him as Dr. X. It's very hard to find out who he is because he doesn't want, he just doesn't want to be, he doesn't want people bothering him. Of course, I'm writing a book about Albert Einstein. Again, available for purchase after tonight's event. And there's a chapter in my book about the brain and the man who stole Einstein's brain. And I was thinking to myself, I wonder if I could find the brain and find Dr. X. I'm a journalist. I should be able to put my journalistic skills to use. And so I was able to find Dr. X. And I reached out to him by email, by phone. And I said, I'd love to interview you. I'd love to see the brain. He said, no, thank you. I'm not interested in interviews. I'm not interested in publicity. No, thank you. And he ignored, he kept saying, no, no, no. And I tried. And it took me about 2 years to write this book. And finally, right before I turned the book into the publisher, he calls me up out of the blue and he goes, Benyamin, I'll show you the brain. Meet me in Princeton tomorrow. I live about a 7-hour drive from Princeton. I hop in my car. I drive to Princeton. I go to the NASA Inn. I check into the NASA Inn, the same hotel that wouldn't let Marian Anderson stay there. And I check in and I go out into the parking lot and I meet this doctor in the parking lot. He pops open his trunk, and in his trunk is the cardboard box with these 3 jars filled with Albert Einstein's brain. And he let me hold these jars. I held that small jar with Albert Einstein's brain. And I thought to myself, and with this I'll conclude and I'll stop talking. I thought to myself, if I could have a few minutes with Albert Einstein in heaven, what would I want to talk to Albert Einstein about? And we talked earlier tonight, Einstein is very famous for his quotations. I would want to talk to Einstein about my favorite Einstein quotation, and that is this. It's 2 sentences. I have no special talent. I am only passionately curious. Look at that first sentence. I have no special talent. Albert Einstein, of all people, has every right to say he has special talent, but he was so humble, he said, I'm garnished, right? I have no special talent. Imagine how much better the world would be today if the people in power, if the politicians and the tech entrepreneurs, if they had just an ounce of Einstein's humility. And then look at that second sentence. I am only passionately curious. We talked a lot tonight about Einstein's humanitarian work. And what does it mean to be a humanitarian? It means to care about people outside of yourself, to be curious about other people, not to be selfish, but to be curious. So when you meet somebody on the street or at shul, at Kiddush, you can say, let me tell you about me. Let me tell you about what I did. Let me tell you about what I accomplished. Or you can be curious. Tell me about you. Tell me your story. Tell me about your struggles. I want to learn about you. And with this, I'll conclude. The 2 biggest lessons I learned about Albert Einstein over years of researching him is, number 1, to have bold humility, and number 2, to always be passionately curious. So that's my spiel. I know I went a few minutes over. I apologize, but I'm happy to move to the next stage of the event for interview and questions. Did I just stop sharing my screen? Hold on.
Thank you very much, Damien.
Thank you.
Everything we want to know, but not enough. So if you want to read more, all the other details, 400 pages of it, are in here. Well,
2 books. Yeah.
do we have any questions from the audience?
How did he earn a living?
How did Einstein earn a living? Is that his question? Well, he worked when he moved to America in the 1930s. He was working for the Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton. So that was his day job. He was working there. He had an office there. Yeah, that was his day job. I mean, he gave speaking engagements also. He was invited to speak a lot of places. He was a visiting professor at Caltech in California. So yeah.
Asking this question because I've heard 2 sort of contradictory views. On the one hand, I've heard that he said, he actually wished he wasn't born Jewish so he could convert into it or whatever. But on the other hand, I've heard that he wasn't religious at all. So I was just wondering, what's his relationship with Judaism?
It's an excellent question. Einstein was not a religious person, as many Germans in the late 1800s. When he was growing up, they were very much assimilated Jews. They didn't even go to shul on the high holidays. There was one moment for about 6 months around Einstein's bar mitzvah where he got super frum, he got super religious around his bar mitzvah. He asked his parents to start keeping kosher in the house, but that lasted for like 6 months, and then he got interested in science as a young teenager, and then he never looked back. So Einstein was not a religious person, but he was a very much a spiritual person. And he's studying his whole career is studying the universe, and he talks often about seeing the hand of God. He's seeing the hand of the divine in the universe. And so he definitely believed in God, and he was a very spiritual person, but he was not like a religious observant person. And as I talked about tonight, he was very much very much a Zionist, and it was very important for him, especially because he saw that he lived in the shadow of the Holocaust, and so he knew how important it was to have a Jewish state. So that was very important to him.
Can you elaborate further on his violin playing? I think he was almost the level of concert violinist.
On his musical talent, is that what you're asking about?
His violin playing.
Yeah, he was a classical. He loved Mozart. He gave. I mean, I don't know, like compared to like an orchestral person, but he did play, classical music, and he would give concerts. Like I said, he gave charity concert for the United Jewish Appeal. There's a great story. Einstein moved to Princeton in October 1933 is when he immigrated, and he moved here right around Halloween. And Halloween comes, and he didn't know what the heck Halloween is. And these kids knock on his door, and they say trick or treat, and he has no idea what they're asking for. Candy, he didn't know anything about that. And so he took his violin on the porch, and he gave them a concert. He gave the kids a concert on the porch. And to this day, now the house now is owned by the Institute. It's a small little house. He was a very, like I said, humble person. The house is owned by the Institute for Advanced Study, and other professors have lived there over the decades. Many Nobel Prize winners have actually lived in this house. So it's lived in by a professor to this day. But every Halloween, there is someone who dresses up as Albert Einstein and gives a concert on the porch to this day. Yeah.
Actually, a little anecdote. My son went to Princeton, and he graduated from the University of Toronto, and he wore an Einstein wig as part of his master's, and he was doing his master's and his doctorate at Princeton. So it does kind of keep going.
Yeah. I will say one thing while you're passing the mic to the next person. One of the professors, I forgot to mention during my talk about the Toronto connection, one of the professors who got a piece of Einstein's brain was at McMaster University, which is up there. And so she did a lot of research on the brain. And in 2023, the CBC made a documentary called The Man Who Stole Einstein's Brain. It's all about this story. I actually appear in the movie. They came to West Virginia to interview me. My chickens are in the documentary, and it's available. I checked before I logged on tonight on the CBC app, or the CBC website. You can actually watch this documentary. You cannot watch it in America, but you can watch it in Canada.
Another question over here? Two questions?
For the bicycle enthusiasts here, Einstein made a very famous quote that I had found: "Life is like riding a bicycle. To keep your balance, you must keep moving." Have you used that one in your? Have you used that one in your lectures?
Yes. That is I do. That's a very famous quote of his. That is a real quote. I'll show you one funny thing here since you brought up his quotes. Let me just share here. You can see the screen, yeah? So, many people share Einstein quotes on social media. You can see this on your screen, the Ivanka Trump.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
So Ivanka Trump once shared an Einstein quote on social media, and I saw it and I realized That is not a real Einstein quote. And I mean, I don't think she knew that. You know, a lot of people share, you know, false Einstein quotes, whatever. And so I commented as Albert Einstein, I commented on her quote and I said, Ivanka, I never said that. And to my surprise, it made international news. This is a paper in London did this, and it just kept going. Here are some other headlines as well. So I didn't realize it, but my little funny comment on her thing, you know, made international news.
Can we ask you what the website is where we would see your Facebook page and all that?
Yeah, so if you're on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter, you just look up Albert Einstein. So it's like facebook.com/Albert Einstein, Instagram.com/Albert Einstein, Twitter.com Albert Einstein. It's just his name, one word. But if you're on any of those platforms, if you're on Facebook, you can just follow Einstein, and every day you'll see these things that I post on there.
I loved your talk, but I have a question. After sending all these various pieces of Einstein's brain here, there, and everywhere around the world, were there any conclusions about his brain? What did people find out?
So that's a great question. I usually, when I go to events in person, I usually bring some eggs for my chickens and I give the eggs to whoever asks the best question. So I would have given you the eggs right now. That's a great question. So some people got a piece of the brain. Some researchers got a piece of the brain, and they were like, I can't tell anything from this little piece of meat, because what is genius? Maybe it's part of his. It's not really the physical brain, the matter. Maybe it's his soul or whatever. So a lot of scientists found nothing special about the brain. Some scientists, two in particular, did find something special in the brain. One of them was the one at McMaster University, and one was another professor at Berkeley in California. And the two things they found were, number one, that Einstein, we have a right side of the brain and a left side of the brain. And we have wires connecting, so to speak, the right side and the left side of the brain. They discovered that Einstein had many, many, many wires connecting the right side of the brain and the left side of the brain. They called it an information superhighway. So that was one interesting thing they found. The other interesting thing they found was Einstein's brain, the pathologist, before he cut it up, he took about 300 pictures, 360, all of the brain before he cut it up. And so they were able to see these really good photographs of the brain. And they said it looked like the brain of a 26-year-old. It had not aged. And Einstein died when he was 76, but they said it looked like a young person's brain. And if you recall, 26 was the age when he did all that stuff I talked about in 1905, when he wrote all those scientific papers. So that was something else they discovered about the brain. There's not to promote somebody else's book, but there are two great books about the brain. Number one is called Possessing Genius, written by a Canadian Toronto journalist, actually. And it's all about the researchers who got pieces of the brain. And it talks a lot about this McMaster University professor. So that's a great book, Possessing Genius. And the other book, remember I told you the guy drove cross country with the brain from New Jersey to California when he was going to return it to Einstein's granddaughter. He was too old. He was in his 80s. He was too old to drive alone. So a journalist drove him on that trip, cross-country trip, and a journalist wrote a book about that cross-country trip, and it's called Driving Mr. Albert. So those are two books that are just about the brain.
Thank you for this terrific presentation. I just wondered a little more about his personal life. Did he have, you mentioned his granddaughter, so I assume he had children. Could you just tell us a little bit about his family?
Yeah. So Einstein was married twice. His first wife, Mileva, his first wife, he met at physics school. She was actually a better student than he was. And that's how they started dating, was he would go to her house to study because she took better notes, and they started a romantic relationship. Einstein, by all accounts, was a horrible husband to her. A very imperfect husband to her. He cheated on her. And they had 3 kids, a daughter who died in infancy, and 2 sons. The 2 sons, one of them eventually died in an insane asylum, and one of them became a successful engineer. And so the Einsteins who are alive today, who are direct descendants of Einstein, come from that son who was the engineer. Einstein got divorced from his first wife, married his second wife, Elsa. Elsa was already named Einstein. She was his first cousin. And so they got married, and they had a much better marriage. And Elsa was a divorcee. She had a daughter, Margot, from her first husband. And so Margot became Albert's stepdaughter. And that granddaughter was Margot's, the granddaughter in this story is Margot's, so it was his step granddaughter. So he has step grandchildren and grandchildren, and yeah, that was his personal life. Yeah, he was not a great husband, and then his second wife died, and he was a widow for the last 15, 20 years of his life, and he had lots and lots of girlfriends.
My question is, the doctor that stole the brain,
Yeah.
that's not ethical? And was it not against the Jewish law that, you're not supposed to,
Yeah.
desecrate the body?
Yeah, that's a great question. So as I said, he stole the brain. First of all, he was a Quaker, this guy. The pathologist was a Quaker. He stole the brain, didn't tell anybody about it. A few weeks after he stole the brain, he gave an interview to the New York Times, and he revealed that he stole the brain. So it was a secret for a few weeks, and then he revealed it to the world. At that point in time, Einstein's family was reading the New York Times and was furious. They had cremated Einstein, tossed his ashes over the Delaware River, and they were furious that this guy had stolen the brain without permission. And they said, please return the brain. And he says, listen, I did it for research. And there's a lot of back and forth. And a lot of there's letters that they wrote back and forth between Einstein's family and this pathologist. All of these letters are at Hebrew University. You can actually see this. And the pathologist begrudgingly eventually convinces the family to let him keep the brain to do research on it on 2 conditions. Condition number 1 was that he had to do research quickly, like within a year. Like don't waste your time. Spend a year. Let's get the research done. And number 2, it has to be published in a scientifically peer-reviewed journal. Obviously, neither of those things happened because he didn't know what he was doing. He was in way over his head. And through the decades, there are letters back and forth between the family and this guy saying, "New, what's going on? What's the latest? What's the latest?" So to answer your legal question is they begrudgingly after the fact gave him permission to do it. They were very upset that nothing happened for decades until the 1990s when these 2 professors who I mentioned started making discoveries and publishing stuff in scientifically peer-reviewed journals. To answer your Jewish question, it was known at the time when this guy was alive that he had the brain. Some rabbis contacted him in 1996 and asked for the brain so they could bury it in Israel. And at the time he said, no, I'm still researching, so you can't have the brain. So yeah.
Another question there?
I'm interested a little bit about you. Do you actually make a living being the manager of the Einstein website?
I wish. No. So my day job is I'm a writer at The Forward, which is the Jewish newspaper. It's been around, over a century. I work for The Forward. That's my day job. As a matter of fact, the big thing that I do at work is I write a morning newsletter. You can subscribe, forward.com/newsletters. I write a morning newsletter. I get up at 5 a.m. before my rooster, before the chicken, Albert Einstein, and I write a newsletter of here's all the Jewish news you need to know today. and I spend a few hours writing it, and like by 8 or 9 a.m. you'll get an email from me with all the Jewish news you need to know today. So you can subscribe to that. It's free. So that's what I spend most of my waking hours doing is writing. I write a lot of articles. You can follow me at the Forward, and I write about anti-Semitism and campus stuff. But I write lots of stories. And then the Einstein thing is basically like an hour a day to be Einstein on social media. And as I said, now I took on Neil Armstrong, Maya Angelou, and Robert Oppenheimer. Those are just side jobs and stuff like that. So that's and I write books. So that's another side job. I take care of my chickens. That's another side job. So yeah.
Any other questions?
Can I ask a question? I just want to ask, are you writing a book now, and a third book, and if so, can you tell us about it?
Thank you for asking that. I just started this in the last couple months, starting a third book. It is about Jews in small towns. And I'll tell you one thing. I just came back from a reporting trip there was a shul, a 113-year-old shul in rural Pennsylvania, which closed down 2 weeks ago. It's been around for over a century and it closed down. They had their final Shabbos service, and I went there for the final Shabbos service. And it was very sad, but hundreds of people who had grown up at the shul came back, flew in from all over to be there for the final Shabbos. So that's a story, but it has a great ending to this story. And I'm in the middle of writing this. So you're getting a sneak peek, but it'll be on the Forward in a couple weeks when I'm done writing it. There is a group of farmers, Jewish farmers in rural Illinois, young farmers, who have decided to build a shul in the middle of a cornfield in rural Illinois. And this shul that has just died in Pennsylvania has donated all of the stuff, the ark, the bima, the stained glass windows. They have donated all of this stuff to the farmers. And the farmers are coming with their tractors and taking down the stained glass windows and carrying them on their trucks and driving back to Illinois to build this shul in this cornfield. And so that's going to be the ending of the story. So it's a great, anyway, so the story is about Jews in small towns. And so like that story will be in the book. And it'll also be an article on the Forward in a few weeks.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen. Well done. And if I may ask you a personal question, I see you're wearing a kippah, and you've mentioned a few things about shuls, and you say your family has a lot of rabbis and references in it. And I just wondered what your background is, and how you carry on your Judaism.
Yeah, I'm an interesting character when it comes to that. So I grew up modern Orthodox in Atlanta, Georgia. As I said, my dad was a rabbi, is a rabbi, he's still alive. Orthodox, not like Hasidic Orthodox, modern Orthodox. And we actually had a shul in our house. My dad built a 1,000 square foot synagogue on the side of our house. And so whether I wanted to or not, Shabbos morning, I was in shul because it was in our house. So I grew up, strict, kosher, Shabbos, the whole 9 yards. All my brothers are modern Orthodox rabbis. I moved in 2012 from Atlanta to small town West Virginia. And so it's a lot different being an Orthodox Jew in small town West Virginia. We don't have a shul here, obviously. So, I live a different kind of observance here in West Virginia. Obviously, I work for a Jewish newspaper. And like I said, I grew up because I was force-fed. I felt force-fed Judaism as a kid. I was forced to keep kosher. I was forced to keep Shabbos. And I had so many non-religious Jewish friends, and I was jealous that they didn't have to keep Shabbos and kosher. And I grew up in the Bible Belt, which has churches everywhere. and you know, I didn't like shul. Shul to me was boring, and churches looked to me exciting. And so that's actually why I wrote this other book, My Jesus Year, where I spent 52 weeks, 52 Sundays going to 52 different churches, Baptist, Pentecostal, Episcopalian, Catholic, and wrote about what I learned there and how it actually made me appreciate Judaism more. So I have I'm not your typical Jew in any, by any stretch of the imagination. So yeah. Oh, and my wife is a convert. I'm the son of a rabbi. My wife is the daughter of a minister who converted to Orthodox Judaism. Just to add a little mix to that.
I'm fascinated by your chickens. Where did you find these chickens? Did you breed these chickens, or it's just off?
I should say it's my wife. We were doing it before COVID, before people, a lot of people did it during COVID. We've had chickens since 2019. My wife just loves animals, and we live in the woods here in West Virginia. You can only see my office here, but we live we live on like 5 acres in the woods. And so we have plenty of space. And so my wife got into backyard chickening, and we have about 25, 26 chickens right now. It's just a fun hobby. We get eggs. Obviously, we get lots of eggs, which is great now that the price of eggs is so high. We don't get enough eggs. We get about, 8, 10 eggs a day. It's not enough to sell, but it's more than we can eat. So we package them up and give them to our neighbors. So we've become very popular in our neighborhood because we're the people that deliver eggs to people. It's just we live out in nature, so it's a fun hobby for us. I grew up, not an animal pet person, and my wife's very much so, and she's kind of brought me over to the pet side. And so we have these chickens, we have 3 dogs, we have a cat. Yeah, it's kind of a little bit of a zoo here.
We have one last question and then we'll round.
Back to Einstein. Did he have siblings?
Did Einstein have siblings? I don't know the answer to that. Oh, yes. Einstein had a sister. He was very close with his sister. She was a few years older than him. If you Google Einstein and his sister, you'll see a very sweet picture of the two of them. He's like 5 and she's like 10. And she moved to America with him. She lived long enough, then she came to America. He was very close with her. Thank you. It took me a second to remember that.
Thank you.
No more questions? Comments? Okay, we're almost running out of time. I have a couple of points. One is, in your book, you had a comment about a lady named Kaya in Israel.
Yeah.
Hava?
Oh, yeah. She's from Toronto.
She did some research and went to in Germany. Circumcision records of Albert, and he was named Abraham, not Albert, according to the record. At some point, his name changed, and it was going to be changed to Albrecht in German, which he didn't like. It got changed to Albert instead, and just around the time he left, the Gestapo was established its headquarters in Berlin in 1933 on Prinz Albrecht Strasse number 8. And that was another reason why he didn't like that name, and his name was Albert forever after that. One other point, I had a farm, did some farming for about 25 years in a small town east of Ottawa, and had about 40 chickens. And learned how to cook eggs, boil eggs, fry them, toast them, eggs. And there was one comment that you buried in your book that was, you don't know how to boil an egg, so I'm going to teach you and everybody else here. The problem with boiling an egg is, how do you peel it afterwards? As many of you know, so it doesn't come out looking like it's all torn apart with big chunks taken out of it. First of all, I put boiling water in a pot. Start off with boiling water, either from a tap, from a hot water tap, or from a kettle.
Yeah.
And that way you know you're starting with boiling water. Put your egg fully into that boiling water, into the pot on the stove that you turned up to high. We'll let them boil for about 15 minutes. If they're starting to boil over, turn them down a bit so they're still simmering at medium high. And after 15 minutes, take them out, but you don't take them out just by plucking them out, like plucking chickens. There's a different way of taking them out. You turn the pot sideways against the inside edge of the sink, the front edge of the sink, let the hot water drain out, and then shake the pot back and forth and back and forth and up and down and up and down and back and forth for about 10 or 15 seconds. The shell breaks about 100 pieces, still sticks to the membrane inside.
Wow.
And then immediately put them under cold water, let the cold water run from the tap for about 5 minutes over the eggs till they're fully cool from the outside to the inside. And then you peel from the top of the egg. Now the top is not purely oval, it's got a pointed end and a rounded end. A farmer that I heard on the radio who told me how to peel eggs, and everybody else listening to him said, start at the top. And also use eggs that are typically 3 to 4 weeks old. If you use fresh eggs, they're very difficult to peel. Older eggs are easier to peel.
Interesting.
Put the date on the end of the box, that's when they're best before, so wait for a few weeks after you bought them. You can have several boxes of eggs and use the older ones first. And the ones last. And that's how you do it. And
Thank you, Bruce.
Cookbook author as well, so I wrote 2 cookbooks, about them here.
Give it up for Bruce.
I'm glad we had a lot of interesting comments. I had 4 pages of questions I was going to ask you. I won't, I think. For
I'm
people
sorry I spoke long.
please read the book. And you can email them or comment to them directly. And thanks all of you for coming. It's a much bigger crowd than we even expected. Few empty seats, but thanks again.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you all for joining us this evening, and a very special thank you to you, Benyamin Cohen, for your excellent presentation, and of course for Temple's very own Bruce Koffler, our moderator. And now Albert Einstein is our everyday companion. Many thanks also to all the Book Break Committee members aided by Ann Rosenfield and AV management by David Collin, hiding back there. None of these Book Break events would take place without the support of the Louis David Katzman Fund. So folks, buy the books and share it with others. Treat yourselves also to some books that are available at the back tables this evening. And stay tuned as more Book Break events and dates will be posted in Temple Sinai events. Just a little aside note, Maj returns to Temple Sinai next Tuesday, May the 13th. The details for that can be found on templesinai.net. And you can register there. It's free for our members and $5 for non-members. And no charge for parking. Have a wonderful evening, and thank you so much for your.
Thank you.